The mess hall at Forward Operating Base Crimson fell silent whenever Erin Mallory walked through the door. At 27, she stood barely 5'4" in her combat boots. Her chocolate brown hair always pulled back in a regulation bun, so tight it made her temples ache. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, her gear spotless, her posture military straight. But none of that mattered to the 143rd Brigade. To them, she was the girl who couldn't handle a rifle when it counted. Erin ladled beans onto her tray, pretending not to hear the whispers that followed her like smoke. That's her, the one who dropped her weapon during final evaluation. Shaky hands, they said. Couldn't handle the pressure. Probably would have gotten her whole team killed in a real firefight. She found an empty table in the corner, the same spot she'd claimed every day for 3 years. As she ate in silence, her mind drifted back to Carter Sniper Training Academy, where everything had fallen apart in a single, devastating moment. The memory played like a broken record. The simulated combat scenario, the unexpected explosive blast that threw her backward into concrete, the searing pain in her shoulder as her rifle clattered across the floor. What haunted her most wasn't the pain. It was the 4 seconds she'd fought to hold on to that weapon, even as her body screamed in agony. 4 seconds that nobody recorded. 4 seconds that didn't matter to the review board. Medical disqualification recommended due to hand tremors under stress. The official report had been swift and merciless. What it didn't mention was her perfect score on every test leading up to that moment. 5 consecutive shots at 1,000 meters, all center mass, all lethal. But paperwork doesn't care about context, and neither did the military bureaucracy that stamped unsuitable for combat operations on her permanent record. Sergeant Marcus Harlan's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. Mallory, communications briefing in 5 minutes. Try not to drop anything important. Laughter rippled through the mess hall. Erin set down her fork, her appetite gone. 3 years of this. 3 years of being the unit's designated failure. Their cautionary tale about what happens when someone reaches beyond their capabilities. But late at night, when the barracks fell quiet, Erin would slip outside with her rifle. In the darkness, behind the equipment shed, she practiced everything Carter Academy had taught her. Breathing techniques, sight alignment, trigger control. Her hands never shook during those midnight sessions. They were steady as stone, precise as surgical instruments. She kept Carter's bullet in her breast pocket a single round. Her instructor had pressed into her palm on her last day at the academy. Only fire this when you're absolutely certain it will save a life, he'd said. The brass was warm against her chest, a reminder of the shooter she could have been. Should have been. As Erin walked toward the briefing room, passing more smirking faces and whispered comments, she wondered if she'd ever get the chance to prove them wrong. The bullet felt heavier today, like it was waiting for something. She had no idea that tomorrow would bring the kind of mission that would test everything she'd learned, and everything she'd been told she wasn't capable of. The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as Bravo Squad filed in. Erin took her usual position at the back, notepad ready for whatever communications duties Sergeant Harlan would assign. The mission board showed a red zone marked Cateran Forest, not a place anyone wanted to visit. Listen up, Harlan barked, his weathered face grim. Delta Team went radio silent 6 hours ago during reconnaissance near Cateran. Last communication indicated they were pinned down by enemy fire. Intelligence suggests at least one sniper has them trapped behind a rocky outcropping. Erin's pulse quickened. She knew those coordinates. The terrain was brutal dense forest with multiple elevation points, perfect for an enemy marksman to control the entire valley. Her mind automatically began calculating angles and sightlines, old habits from her academy training. Our job is simple, Harlan continued. Locate Delta, neutralize threats, extract personnel. Johnson, you're on point. Martinez covers our 6. Williams watches the eastern approach. His eyes found Aaron last, cold and dismissive. Mallory handles communications only. You stay behind cover and relay messages exactly as I tell you. No initiative, no suggestions, no playing soldier. Private Johnson snickered. Maybe we should get her some of those grippy gloves they make for seniors. You know, in case she needs to handle anything important. The room erupted in laughter. Aaron's cheeks burned, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd learned that. Reacting only made it worse. That's enough, Harlan said, though his tone suggested he'd enjoyed the joke. We move out at 0600. Mallory, I want you to understand something. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. This isn't training. This isn't some academy fantasy where you get to pretend you're Annie Oakley. Real soldiers are depending on us, and I won't have their lives endangered. By someone trying to prove a point, Aaron nodded stiffly. Understood, Sergeant. But as the briefing broke up, she caught Williams giving her a strange look. Not mockery, but something else. Curiosity, maybe, or doubt. He'd been at the base longer than most, old enough to remember when Aaron first arrived with her academy. Scores. Scores that had been impressive enough to raise eyebrows before her record caught up with her reputation. That night, Aaron lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. Around her, the other soldiers talked quietly about the mission. There. Voices heavy with concern. Delta Team was good, some of the best the 143rd had. If they were pinned down for 6 hours, the situation was worse than the briefing had suggested. She rolled Carter's bullet between her fingers, thinking about her instructor's words. The difference between a good shooter and a great shooter isn't accuracy under perfect conditions. It's the ability to make impossible shots when everything is going wrong. Tomorrow, she'd be relegated to the rear, handling radio communications, while real soldiers did the fighting. But something told her this mission wouldn't go according to plan. Something told her that before it was over, she might finally get the chance to find out if her hands were really as shaky as everyone believed. The bullet felt warm in her palm, almost alive with possibility. The Cateran forest felt wrong from the moment they entered its shadows. Aaron had spent enough time in hostile terrain to recognize the signs. Too quiet, too still. Even the birds had abandoned this place. She adjusted her communication equipment and fell into position behind the massive fallen log that would serve as her command post, exactly as Harlan had ordered. Overwatch, this is Bravo 2, she whispered into her headset. We're approaching the target coordinates. No movement visible. Static crackled back. Copy, Bravo 2. Intel suggests hostiles are dug in deep. Watch yourselves out there. Through her binoculars, Aaron could see the rocky outcropping where Delta Team was supposedly trapped. No movement, no signals, no indication of life. The silence was suffocating. Something's not right, Williams muttered over the radio. This feels like the first shot exploded from somewhere high and to the west. Johnson dropped immediately, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped between his fingers. Before anyone could react, a second shot rang out and Martinez went down hard, not moving. Sniper on the high ground, Harlan screamed. Everyone find cover and stay low. Aaron pressed herself against the fallen log, her mind automatically shifting into tactical analysis mode, despite her official role as communications only. The shots had come from approximately 800 meters away, elevated roughly 60 feet above their position. Professional work. The enemy had chosen his spot perfectly. For 12 agonizing minutes, they lay pinned down while an invisible killer picked them apart. Every time someone tried to move, another shot would crack across the valley. Every attempt to radio for backup met with static and interference. Aaron studied the terrain through her scope, tracking the sound of gunshots analyzing timing between shots. The shooter was concealed behind a cluster of pine trees on the western ridge. Difficult shot, but manageable with the right angle and proper equipment. She keyed her radio to Harlan's frequency. "Sergeant, I think I can get a clean shot if I can reach my rifle." "Absolutely not." Harlan's response was immediate and harsh. "This isn't some training exercise where you get to play sniper. This is real combat, and I'm not going to watch you get yourself killed trying to relive your academy fantasies." "But sir, I know exactly where he is." "The angle is, your job is communications, period." Another shot echoed across the valley. This time, it was Harlan who cried out, blood spreading across his leg as he writhed behind inadequate cover. Aaron watched her squad leader's face contort with pain, listened to the panic creeping into her teammates' voices as they realized their situation was deteriorating rapidly. No backup coming. Limited ammunition. Growing casualty count. Williams keyed his radio, desperation clear in his voice. "We've got 3 men down, and we're almost out of ammo. Where the hell is that backup? If we stay here much longer, we're all dead," Johnson gasped through gritted teeth. Aaron stared at the rifle beside her pack, the weapon Harlan had explicitly forbidden her to touch. Her hands weren't shaking. They never shook when lives were on the line. She thought about Carter's bullet, about 3 years of midnight practice sessions, about proving something to herself, if not to anyone else. While the others focused on their wounded leader, she made her decision. Aaron moved like smoke through the underbrush, every step deliberate and silent. She'd retrieved her rifle while the others tended to Harlan's wound, slipping away from the squad's position, using the creek bed to mask her movement and sound. 3 years of academy training had taught her that stealth was often more valuable than firepower. Carter's voice echoed in her memory as she crawled through the dense forest. When everyone around you is chaos, you become the calm center. You become the one fixed point in a spinning world. Through her earpiece, she could hear her squad situation getting worse by the minute. "Harlan's losing too much blood," Williams reported. "We need immediate medical evacuation." Contact. I count at least 3 more hostiles moving up from the south." Johnson's voice cracked with pain and panic. Aaron forced herself to remain calm, to focus on the mechanics of movement and positioning. She'd studied this terrain for months during intelligence briefings, memorizing every ridge and valley around Cateran Forest. Now, that knowledge was keeping her alive as she worked her way to a firing position. The enemy sniper had chosen his spot well, excellent field of fire, natural concealment, multiple escape routes. Professional work. But Aaron had spent 3 years analyzing her failure at Carter Academy. 3 years replaying every lesson and technique she'd been taught. She knew something about patience that her younger self hadn't understood. Reaching her chosen position, she settled into the tall grass approximately 400 meters from her squad's location. The angle would be challenging. She'd need to thread the bullet through overlapping tree branches and shadows to reach her target. But it was doable. Everything was doable if you were willing to wait for the right moment. Through her scope, the target area was partially obscured. The enemy sniper had positioned himself well, using the natural camouflage of pine branches and shadows to break up his silhouette. Aaron couldn't get a clear visual in these lighting conditions. She needed him to make a mistake, to reveal himself through movement or reflected light. "Bravo 2, we're running out of time here," Williams called over the radio. "Harlan's in bad shape, and those hostiles are getting closer." Aaron keyed her mic once to acknowledge, then fell silent. Speaking would only give away her position, and right now, surprise was her only advantage. She controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, and became one with the forest floor. Minutes stretched like hours. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, not applying pressure, but ready to act the instant opportunity presented itself. This was what Carter had trained her for, not the controlled environment of a shooting range, but the chaos of real combat where everything depended on one perfect shot. Then she saw it, a brief flash of sunlight reflecting off metal as the enemy sniper adjusted his scope. Just for a fraction of a second, but enough. Aaron closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to her old instructor. "Carter, I won't waste this." Shot. Time dilated as Aaron's finger found the trigger. Her breathing was controlled and rhythmic, her heartbeat steady, her hands absolutely still. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same hands they'd declared too shaky for sniper work were now the only things standing between her squad and annihilation. She squeezed the trigger with perfect textbook form, exactly as Carter had taught her. 3 years ago, the bullet traveled 847 meters in 1.2 seconds. It passed through 3 layers of pine branches, a cluster of leaves, and a small gap between 2 tree trunks before striking its target with surgical precision. The enemy sniper was killed instantly. Silence fell over the battlefield like a heavy blanket. Then chaos erupted over the radio. "Shooter's down. Repeat, the shooter is down." Williams' voice cracked with disbelief. Who made that shot? Where did that come from? How is that even possible? Aaron stood up from her concealed position and began walking back toward her squad, rifle held across her chest. Every eye was on her as she approached, and the expressions on her teammates' faces ranged from shock to something approaching awe. Johnson, the same private who had mocked her relentlessly for months, stared at her with his mouth hanging open. He turned to Williams and whispered, "She's the only person who ever actually passed Carter's final test." But they never put it in her official record. What he said was absolutely true. 3 years ago, Sergeant Major Carter had personally reviewed Aaron's performance during her final evaluation. Despite the incident with the dropped rifle, her overall score had been the highest he'd seen in 2 decades of instruction. Her tactical knowledge was flawless, her marksmanship exceptional. Her psychological profile showed remarkable stability under pressure. Carter had fought the medical disqualification. He'd submitted 3 separate appeals, each with detailed documentation of Aaron's actual capabilities. He'd requested a formal review of the incident, complete with video analysis showing exactly what had happened during that explosive blast. Every appeal had been denied. The bureaucracy had made its decision. "Mallory," Harlan called weakly from behind his rock. Blood loss had drained the color from his face, but his eyes held something she'd never seen before: respect. That was impossible. The angle, the distance, the conditions. "Not impossible, Sergeant," Aaron replied quietly. "Just improbable." As the dust settled and medics arrived to evacuate the wounded, Aaron noticed Williams approaching her with something in his hand. It was a small recording device. "I filmed the whole thing," he said quietly. "The shot, the angle, everything. This footage is going to change some minds back at headquarters." Aaron nodded, but said nothing. She wasn't interested in vindication or proving anyone wrong. She only cared that her friends were going home alive. But as Williams uploaded the video to the military network, Aaron had no idea that within hours, drone footage of her impossible shot would be circulating through sniper communities worldwide, sparking debates about accuracy, training standards, and the reliability of psychological evaluations. The girl, they said, couldn't handle pressure, had just redefined what was possible under the worst conditions imaginable. The video went viral within military networks faster than Aaron could have imagined. By the time Bravo Squad returned to base, her shot had been analyzed, enhanced, and shared among sniper instructors across 3 continents. Comments poured in from marksmen around the world. "This is what real marksmanship looks like. Whoever failed her should be court-martialed. I've been shooting for 15 years, and I couldn't make that shot." Aaron tried to ignore the attention. But it was impossible. Soldiers who had mocked her for years now approached with awkward congratulations and requests for shooting tips. The same people who had whispered about her shaky hands now wanted to know her secrets. 7 days after the Catron Forest incident, she received orders to report to base headquarters immediately. She expected disciplinary action for disobeying Harlan's direct orders about weapons handling. Instead, she found a familiar figure waiting in the lobby. Sergeant Major Carter looked older now, grayer, wearing civilian clothes instead of his instructor's uniform. But his handshake was still firm, and his eyes still held that sharp intelligence that had made him legendary among sniper trainees. "I told you that bullet was special," he said with a slight smile. "I just didn't know it would take 3 years to prove it." Carter had driven 8 hours to reach the base after seeing the footage. In his briefcase were copies of every appeal he'd submitted on Erin's behalf, every piece of documentation proving that her academy dismissal had been a bureaucratic mistake. "The Pentagon wants to review your case," he explained as they walked toward the command building. "The video evidence is pretty compelling. Hard to argue someone has hand tremors when they can thread a needle at 800 meters. That afternoon, during a memorial service for soldiers killed in action, the base commanding officer made an unexpected announcement. "Among us today is someone who was once told she wasn't good enough for combat operations. Someone who was dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated. That person is the reason 9 of our people came home alive from what should have been a suicide mission." He gestured toward Erin, who stood at attention in the back row. "Specialist Erin Mallory represents the best of what we strive for in the military, not because she made an impossible shot under impossible conditions, but because she never stopped believing in herself when everyone else had given up on her." Erin didn't give a speech. She simply stood quietly, one hand resting over the empty pocket where Carter's bullet had once been. The round that had saved her squad was evidence now, but its purpose had been fulfilled. After the service, Williams approached her with news that would change everything. "I got word from Carter Academy. They're reopening your case. Full review, new psychological evaluation, the works. They want you back as an instructor." For the first time in 3 years, Erin allowed herself to smile. 2 weeks later, Erin received new orders. Report to the Advanced Marksmanship Training Facility as an assistant instructor for crisis response techniques. The same academy that had dismissed her for medical unfitness now wanted her to train the next generation of military snipers. Her first day back at Carter Academy felt surreal. The buildings looked the same, but everything else had changed. Her former classmates were now instructors themselves, and they greeted her with respect instead of pity. The range where she'd once been humiliated had been renamed the Mallory Precision Course. On her desk, she found a nameplate waiting. Specialist Erin Mallory. Never shot for records, only shot to save lives. The Academy's culture began shifting almost immediately. New recruits would ask about the nameplate, and instructors would tell them Erin's complete story, not just the successful shot, but the 3 years of doubt and determination that led to that moment. Training protocols were updated to emphasize real-world decision-making over test scores. Psychological evaluations were revised to account for different types of stress responses. The Academy even implemented a new policy requiring multiple reviewers for any medical disqualification. Erin's story became required reading for all incoming students. They learned about the difference between performance under controlled conditions and performance when lives depend on the outcome. Most importantly, they learned that sometimes the most valuable people are the ones who've been told they're not valuable at all. Young snipers would seek Erin out for advice, expecting technical tips about long-range shooting or equipment maintenance. Instead, she would tell them, the most important shot you'll ever take won't be on a range. It will be when everyone is counting on you, and you're not sure you can make it. That's when you discover who you really are. But the most meaningful change came during graduation ceremonies. Instead of simply handing out certificates, instructors now presented each graduate with a single bullet, just like the one Carter had given Aaron years ago. Only fire this when you're absolutely certain it will save a life, they would say. That's what separates a sniper from a shooter. Aaron watched these ceremonies with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her failure had become the foundation for better training, better evaluation standards, and better support for struggling students. The girl who had been labeled as lacking courage, stability, and skill was now shaping the next generation of military marksmen. 5 years after the Cadron Forest incident, Aaron stood before a new class of sniper candidates at Carter Academy. The students were young, eager, and terrified, just as she had been once upon a time. "Some of you will fail this course," she began, her voice carrying across the silent classroom. "Some of you will be told you don't have what it takes. Some of you will leave here believing that you're not good enough." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I want you to remember something when that happens. Your worth as a soldier and as a person isn't determined by a test score or an evaluation report. It's determined by what you do when everything is falling apart and people are counting on you." In the back row, a young recruit raised her hand nervously. "Ma'am, is it true that you failed sniper school?" Aaron smiled. "According to my official record, yes. I was medically disqualified for hand tremors under stress." She held up her hands steady as rocks. "But sometimes, the people making those decisions don't see the whole picture." She walked to the window overlooking the precision course where she'd once struggled with self-doubt. "The military bureaucracy said my hands were too shaky for sniper work. But when my squad needed a miracle, those same hands delivered perfection on the first try." The classroom was absolutely silent. "I failed sniper school according to the paperwork," Aaron continued. "But I passed the only examination that truly mattered. The one where failure meant watching my friends die, and I didn't just pass. I set a new standard for what's possible when someone refuses to accept other people's limitations." After class, as students filed out discussing what they'd heard, one young man approached Aaron's desk. He was small for a soldier, probably no more than 5'6", with nervous eyes and hands that trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "they're saying I might not make it through the program. My test scores are good, but they think I don't have the right temperament for high-stress situations." Aaron looked at him for a long moment, seeing herself from years ago. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a single bullet, the same one Carter had given her, but turned as evidence after the investigation. "Take this," she said, pressing it into his palm. "Only fire it when you're absolutely certain it will save a life. And remember, sometimes the best shots are taken by people who were never supposed to be shooters at all." The young soldier stared at the bullet in amazement. "Ma'am, I don't understand. Why are you giving this to me?" Aaron smiled, thinking of Carter, of Harlan, of all the people who had doubted her along the way. "Because someone once told me that our job isn't about trophies or records or proving how tough we are. Our job is about saving lives when everything else has failed." As the student left, clutching the precious bullet, Aaron turned back to her window. Somewhere out there, new snipers were learning that failure wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of their chance to prove what they were really made of. True honor doesn't announce itself with medals or promotions. It lives quietly in moments when one person's steady hand can mean the difference between tragedy and triumph. Aaron Mallory had learned that lesson the hard way. Now she was making sure others wouldn't have to. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.